All right, school's about to close down. I should be going home, but seems like every morning I show up and want to make a video, the mall rats show up, and it's pretty irritating, so I thought I would do this while I had a chance. So this is another strongman in history video. We're getting towards the top now. The people we're going to be talking about are just insanely nuts strong now. It's like a whole nother level. It's insane. So today we're gonna do Apollon the Mighty. So he was born Louis Uni, a French strongman, super famous for his grip strength. He's born February 21st, 1862, and descended from a family of locally well-known giants. His grandfather, who was born in 1772, was 6'8", and in the 1800s, which he would be 18 around then, or 28, my bad. So, but in 1800, when he was 28, average height in France for a man was about 5'4.5", and he was 6'8". So they were gigantic, powerful people. And he ran away to a traveling circus at age 14, got back to his parents, and then went to the service, got out around age 20, and took over Café Fontaine in Paris, renovated it, and renamed it Concert Apollon. And they did like theatrical programs with athletic acts thrown in. Ended up not working out for him. He had to relinquish it. He lost a ton of money in the process. And then he took part in Greco-Roman wrestling competition. Did really good. So he was famous for being insanely strong and dominating wrestling. And then after he would dominate in wrestling matches, he would do strongman acts. So he would do both these in the same night. He was so strong, he would dominate other super strong world-class people that wrestled for a living. And then he would go and lift enormous weights to entertain people. He was just insane. So some of the feats he was famous for: he could take 80 kilos, which is 176 pounds, and do this. Like, that is one of the most insane things I've ever heard. He could also pinch grip with 2 fingers, 80 kilos again, 176 pounds. Now with my whole hand, I've held 2 35s together, and I've struggled really hard on my best days when I was doing lots and lots of grip work to get a couple 45s together, but I was never good at it, and I could never do it very long. But 176 pounds, that's just crazy. In 1889, he competed against this strongman named Bata, and he had a set of 118 kilogram train wheels, which is about 260 pounds. Doesn't sound very heavy, but it's a train wheel, so it's on a train axle. So think about how fat that is. And because of the ridiculous size of it, it was extremely hard to lift. So this strongman he was competing against was really strong and had really strong hands. So he was able to get this train axle, as fat as it was at 260 pounds, all the way up to his shoulder, which is super admirable, and props out to him, because there's no way I could have done that, or anybody I know could have done it. But that's why he was a world-class strongman. But Apollon just lifted it all easy, straight over his head, like it was no big deal, because he was a freak. So then another thing is in the 1900s, him and a famous John Grun Marx, who was another world-class strongman, went to Dinsbani School of Strength, and they were gathering a bunch of strongman proteges and strongmen for like training sessions. And there was this famous challenge dumbbell there. It was only 226 pounds, but it was crazy nuts fat. It was a hard handle to hold on. And I told you about how when we did the competition, we had a barbell that was real fat and it would try to slide out of our hands. Well, that you're using 2 hands. So even though that sounds really light, with just 1 hand, that had to be really nuts heavy. So it was heavy enough that at this time period in history, only 3 men in the whole world had succeeded in getting off the ground with 1 hand. They'd just like clamp it with their mighty grip and pull it up and around knee height, waist height. Just the goal was to get it off the ground because nobody could do it, and only 3 people could do it. And one of them was this John Grun Marx, who was a friend of Apollon's and knew how strong Apollon was. And later down the list, when we get to Louis Cyr, you're going to see a funny trait that Apollon and Louis Cyr had in common, where there was like this insane, fierce competitiveness. And when you tell them they can't do something, oh man, you just look out because they're going to do it. So he went up to the dumbbell, knowing how strong Apollo was and purposely trying to provoke him, said, "This dumbbell's really, really, really hard. I'm the only person here that can do this." And he pulled it up because he really was the only person there that could do it besides Apollon, but he knew Apollon could do it. And Apollon got really mad, and he just went over and grabbed it, and he threw it up so high with like this snatch that it like fell out of his hand and flew 10 feet behind him. So everyone was just like floored when that happened. And that is not like a once in a lifetime occasion. He did things like that quite often. Like, he had the competitiveness, like people, like if he saw a guy struggling to pick up a big barbell with a thick handle that weighed 500 pounds, then he would go and pick it up with 1 hand. And he saw someone struggling to pick something up like a dumbbell with 1 hand, he would like snatch it up over his head and then slam it on the ground. He just liked to dominate because he was so insanely strong. And these are world-class strongmen he's dominating. It's craziness. And then there was another time when he was challenged by a strongman, Andre Brandelli, who said nobody but him could clean and jerk his 278-pound barbell, because again, it was another big fatty, and they didn't have like, we have sleeves now that turn, but back then they were solid, so it didn't have that spin. So when you try to jerk, it would try to roll out of your hands and stuff. It's way harder to jerk, to clean these big, fat, huge barbells than it is just to deadlift them off the ground, and even that's hard. So this guy managed to do it, and Apollon was all like, "Oh yeah?" So instead of cleaning and jerking it, he just straight up snatched it. just to show the guy. It's just like straight from the ground overhead, 1 movement, no clean and jerk, just phew, straight up. It was like craziness. And then later he was challenged by the Russian trio. No, they were known as the Razio Trio, and they announced they came to take away Apollon's title of world's strongest man. So the biggest of the 3 guys got in the stage to compete against him. They had like this 143-pound barbell that had like spears that could be like unscrewed and filled with stuff to be made heavier and then re-screwed on. So there were like 4 of these spears, so you could like make it different weights. So they filled 2 of it to bring it to 200, and Apollon decided that was way too light. So he asked them to refill the remaining spears, which would have brought it up to 257, which isn't very heavy, but again, this is a fat barbell. This is what's making the differences in all this, is that it's so fat, it's insanely hard to hold on to. And like I said, Apollon's known for his grip strength, one of the best grips ever. Like the Groner guy that I did earlier might be one of the only guys that could ever compete. So they decided to play a joke on Apollon and took the spears off and put some solid metal domes on, which instead of it weighing 257, now it weighed 341 pounds or 155 kilos. So Apollon didn't really notice the difference. He just cleaned it like nothing and jerked it like nothing. And then, just to show off, he like centered his right hand into the middle of the bar, let go of it with his left hand, and then he brought his right foot off the ground, brought it up like about 90 degrees and was holding 347 up over his head like this. And then he let it drop, caught it in the crooks of his elbows, then popped his elbows up and caught it and put it on the ground. So then this big Russian guy, he was obviously impressed, but he was thinking it was like 200 pounds because that's what they were thinking. So he probably knew he was shown up, but he thought at least he could get it up and not look stupid. But he went to pull it up and he couldn't even budge it because it was 341 pounds, which isn't heavy by strongman standards, but because of how fat it was, the grip strength to get that off the ground is insane. And even a world-class strongman, even the strongest of 3 world-class strongmen, couldn't get it off the ground. So then he has this famous thing he did in his act called the escaped prisoner, or the escaping prisoner. And he would put himself into like this prison cage, and then he would bend the bars and get out. And these were like real bars. This wasn't like some fake like joke. I told you how some of these people had like good theatrics and good presentation, but just like the Saxton trio, he was 100% legit. He was really doing all the stuff he was doing with real stuff. He just had insane grip strength, insane strength everywhere, and just bend these bars and get right out. Well, one day, I don't even know what happened. Like, for some reason, they did like this super, super strong tempered steel where they do whatever they do to make steel a much, much stronger grade than it normally is. And he was trying to do his act, and he starts going, and they won't budge. And his wife starts yelling at him how he's being lazy again, because sometimes he would slack off. But he really wasn't being lazy. It was like insanely hard, and he just went and went and went, and he was like, what in the world's wrong with me? And finally he just went crazy, because I told you, he has that same thing as Louis Uni, where if he can't do something, he gets like insanely competitive and goes to another place and just makes things happen. And somehow he bent this super, super, super strong tempered steel and got out of the little prison thing in the act. And then he was like looking at his bars all dumbfounded, like, what in the world was that all about? And then later they found out what happened, and it was one of the best feats of strength ever in history. Like, people that study strength history are still talking about it today. So that's why I initially had Apollon lower on my list, because I hadn't read the right things. And then when I started studying everyone, I was like, forget this man, he's shooting up to the top. Like, he's gonna be with the likes of Louis Uni and Paul Anderson and stuff. Like, so that was Apollon the Mighty, and I hope you enjoyed hearing about him.